Thank you. This is going to be a small group, so we want to make it informal. We want to make, this is really geared towards helping you kind of look at how you might take your soil health lab results and, all the practices that you've been doing and just be a little more systematic and kind of put all this into a plan. And, Sally Rizzo has been kind enough. Hi, Sally. I see that you're on. Sally's been kind enough to open up her farm to have us. We conducted the soil health sample with her and sent it off to the UH Grow Lab about a month prior than we did with the rest of the cohort. And we did that just so that we could get some results back and start kind of looking at that so that we have a good example of how we would take, the in-field observations that we learned during the second workshop and take the lab results and how we can use all this information to help us inform, our goals. And hi guys. Okay, I'm gonna mute somebody. Sorry. So I think it's okay to just get started because we will be recording this. And I'm going to launch a little poll. But just to help us kind of really understand how we can participate, what we can expect, this is really geared towards demonstrating how you would take your soil health lab results that each person in this cohort will receive and how you're going to take those skills that you've learned, to kind of assess the function health of your soil. That was the infill soil health assessment. We did the second kind of in-person workshop at Kauai Community Ag Park. And then just, your observations for what it depends on how long you've been on your land, but what and how to take that all that information in and assign some goals and really kind of be a little more strategic because all of us are doing soil health practices. But what we hear is that, it'd be nice to just kind of get these down into a plan. And so I'm going to launch a little poll right now. And then I'm going to switch to the next slide just so you can kind of see an overview of what we're planning to address. So 1 second, let me just kind of focus on getting this poll up because it just takes a moment. Oh. Or Louiser, I don't know if you guys are able to see it. The poll options at the bottom. Okay. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I'm going to launch the first poll. This is pretty detailed, guys, so I hope you're ready for this. But this is what we're asking for is level of detail. So anytime we engage farmers, we really want to feel that we're valuing your time because you guys have so many things you're trying to do, trying to produce healthy crops. You need to make sure production in the field is happening. You're getting your yields. You also have the business side. And, now we're really, we're all interested in soil health, and we really see this as a lens to help you troubleshoot. If you have if you can improve the function and the properties of your soil. And so we're going to give you a really good demonstration of how to walk through that process using Sally Rizzo's soil health management plan. This soil health management plan that Louise and Sally will speak on is a soil health plan for farmers. And so we really want to kind of discuss what do farmers value in a soil health plan just for face value. So this is part of a bigger program, which we've described to everyone that Oahu RC&D, we've been fortunate to engage in a cooperative agreement with NRCS. And Amy and Jason will speak later on just how we're rolling out soil health management plans in Hawaii and what that means to local farmers and what that might look like and how you can kind of prepare in the future to participate in this program. But we also, all of us are doing practices, and how do we bring those into a more informed and systematic approach? So thank you for filling out this poll. We'll just kind of continue to leave this up. And it is 4:05, so I'm going to just switch the slide and ask that Louise please introduce yourself, and if you can help just kind of give us a quick overview of what you'll be presenting on with Sally. And Sally, thank you for your time and thank you for being willing to share your information with everybody.
Yes, if you could go 2 slides over, India, thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Louise Martin. It's great to be online with you all today. We're going to be looking at some of Old Kaloa Regenerative Farm's soil health plan here today on this call. We have Sally Rizzo, who is wonderful and on the call with us as well. And thank you again, Sally, for letting us share out your plan and the work we've been making together here. So just a quick overview, you know, farmers all do practices for their soil, but really how do we put these into a system to achieve soil health? Soil health planning combines field observations, lab assessments, and farmer knowledge to document conditions and set goals. From our first in-person, we heard from a lot of you that you are dealing with compaction issues on your farm. If you could all please, who were able to join today, use the poll that India posted to share that compaction would be something you'd like to address in a soil health plan. I believe that's item 3 on the poll. But first, in the planning process, we want to consider the past and current management, as well as the site and producer resources. If you could go to the next slide, India. Displayed are some of the expected climate and soil properties at Old Kaloa Regenerative Farm. It's a mollisol, which is a great agricultural soil, though there is some heavy use history that I'll let Sally cover in more detail, as well as her plans and soil health goals. Sally, if you could please give us an overview of your site history, everything you've done so far, and your soil health goals. There's also the field map to the right, if you'd like to use that to describe your farm.
Hello, you guys hear me?
Yes.
You sound good.
Good. I'm at my farm. It's a little windy. It's one of our issues. But yeah, thank you everyone. And stoked to kind of share my results with you guys. Like she said, the history is pretty intense out here. I had someone call it kind of like ground zero for the sugarcane industry. We're right next to the Kaloa sugar mill, which I'm told is the first successful sugar mill of all Hawaii. And our road on the other map, I think you said we had, I don't know if you can switch to that. There's a road that's kind of bordering our acres, and that road was used as the like crop dusting. So that's where they would throw out the pesticides and the chemical fertilizers. So our zone is just like, has a deep history of just kind of the soil being burnt out and not much going into it to revive it. So fast forward after that, and then GMO companies are my neighbors, and they were here about 10 years ago doing growing seed. And with that, there's a lot of spraying that goes on to just be able to get the seed and be able to get a good crop for the seed. So there's just been a lot of that activity here on all 24 acres. So the whole goal of our farm is to just kind of small scale, you know, plot by plot, bring the soil back to life, as what she has here, our current management. So we had it was all overgrown by the time we got it. It was hollykoa and guinea grass, Christmas berry. And I couldn't even tell if it was flat or not, but it's very much flat. And, you know, after we went through, we had a tractor come and kind of clear it out, get rid of the hollykoa and the guinea grass. And then they went and they ripped it and they disked it, and they offered to till it, but I just felt like it was a little much and I wasn't sure how much acreage I was going to do right away. So we opted out and we're spot tilling, which is kind of like a term for just going in and I'm only tilling where I need to for the first time. And then after that, I'm really opting out of tilling and trying to just build up the soil health. I'm doing raised beds. They're about 3 foot wide, 100 foot long, and I'll go in with a broad fork. We've been layering with everything from cardboard and experimenting with that. Local manures. We have a horse farm right next to us. We have chickens, we have goats. So we're trying to integrate our own manures and local manures, and layering with compost that's made on an island. That's not the best. So we are working on a grant with a compost company to try to get something on site to help build up, because you'll see with our results, we're really high in some things and really low in other things. So yeah, just a lot of just trying to incorporate a lot of organic material. We have cover crops going right now. We've experimented with a bunch. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go ahead and take a look at your soil health lab results next, but I think it's going to be very exciting to see how this baseline trends over time with your new management. So here are the lab results we got from the sample collected at Sally's in August. When we sampled the field, there was just bare ground under silage tarp, which is reflected in the chemical, biological, and physical measurements we got back from the lab here. On this chart, the leftmost column states the soil health indicator. The next reports the value collected at Old Kaloa, and then the orange column reports the median value, or the median value for all mollisols University of Hawaii has tested in the state. And on the right, they are including these scatter plots, which just have every black dot is a soil health test that they've conducted for these mollisols, and then the red dot is the value tested at Old Kaloa. It's kind of cool to see it visually where all these indicators fall. But looking at the physical properties, we saw that there was a high bulk density and low water stable aggregates. So this indicates that the soil lacks structure or soil beds, which form that balance of soil material and pore space. So this reduces infiltration and makes it harder for roots to work their way down the soil profile, which also limits their potential to reach nutrients and also just be that stable base for all the above ground crop foliage. This lab results indicate that there is potential to improve these two physical attributes of the soil. Sally could use this lab result to set a soil health goal to improve soil aggregates and to think about what practices she could use to reach this goal. And thinking about things like reducing tillage, which Sally said she's already doing now that she's managing, adding organic matter and maintaining a diversity of roots will help supply exudates and support microbes that then are going to produce those carbohydrates and proteins that will develop the soil aggregates over time. And this matches up with what we saw in the field. Sally has observed her soil as dust, but she's already seeing improvements in areas of her farm where she's been adding inputs. So then looking at the chemical properties of the soil here, the soil was on par for organic carbon, but dissolved organic carbon to dissolved organic nitrogen was very high. And so this measurement's a ratio. So because the carbon was not abnormally high, this shows that there's little dissolved nitrogen. The soil is likely to respond to nitrogen inputs with high mobilization rates where nitrogen is uptaken by soil microbes instead of plants. And so most soils that I've seen on these soil tests here are usually in the ratio of 15:1 of that DOC to DON. So just the system needs more organic nitrogen to bring this ratio down. And just, anytime we're adding a carbon-based mulch, you want to consider what that C to N ratio is, if it's going to be trending our soil towards immobilization or mineralization. And then the last property in the chemical, the last indicator in the chemical properties section is this hot water extractable carbon, which just measures the easily broken down fraction of carbon in the soil, which comes from amino acids, root exudates, and so this is what's readily able to be used by microbes. So this value being lower matches what we see in the next section, the biological component section. Overall, microbial activity was lower, as well as the enzyme indicators for nitrogen and carbon cycling. But I just think all of these values are somewhat to be expected given the field condition when we sampled. I think we went out and sampled now that Sally's in production in field 1, it's going to look totally different with those living roots. But as you all get your results, you're going to be able to see the picture that this is painting of your site from this soil health lens perspective. Together, these measurable attributes, the physical, chemical, and biological properties, just help tell you what's going on at your site from a soil health sort of lens. And so Sally, how did these soil test results change or support your plans for your site? Or it really aligned with what you detailed at the beginning of this presentation?
Working with the local compost company to try to get, I guess they call it feedstocks, right? So you're talking about seeing that our ratio is 272 to 1 instead of the 15 to 1 for nitrogen to carbon. It's pretty outrageous. So really focusing on just trying to get an organic carbon or organic nitrogen source going on site is really our focus right now, that we know, because I had no idea it was that off balance. And just really paying attention how much carbon I'm putting in, like you were saying, so I'm not throwing it off more. That stuff is still really new to me, so I'm reaching out and I'm trying to work with as many people as possible that understand it better than me. But it's good to have these numbers, because, you know, being that far out just shows me like there's a need to like immediately address it. So we're just starting production, but I'm realizing that to keep going, I'm going to need to implement different systems that kind of promote nitrogen being on our land. And things are starting to yellow out a little bit now. We had talked, I said things weren't, but our papaya trees and things that are kind of like heavy feeders are starting to yellow out, which I think is pretty, it's what you would kind of see with a nitrogen deficiency. So just being mindful of that and just trying to come up with the nitrogen sources. It's really going to be my focus due to knowing this information now.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be really exciting to see how this changes. I think you have a really good mindset of how you're going to change the soil on your land. If we could go to the next slide, please, India. So when all of you get your results, you're going to have a good indication of what practices would benefit your soil. Displayed here is an example of how we take the results to set goals and match them up with practices to consider. So just getting a diversity of living roots with incorporation of more nitrogen fixers and minimizing disturbance should impact and improve soil aggregate stability and improve the cycling of carbon and nitrogen in your soil over time. And if we could go to the next slide. If we wanted to focus on that high dissolved organic carbon to dissolved organic nitrogen ratio, you'll want to make sure that the compost you're applying has that ratio that's less than 24 to 1 C to N. So ratios less than this will encourage faster decomposition by being higher in nitrogen. Incorporating leguminous cover crops could also be another source of getting organic N into your system. You also don't want to add too much mulch you don't want to add too much mulch at once, because that can be like a high source of carbon at the top, while it could be good at suppressing weeds, just given what we saw here. You also don't want to add too much soluble inorganic nitrogen to overcompensate for that low end, because you're going to risk a lot of it being lost to the environment since it volatilizes readily. But over time, I think the system here will stable out as it gets more diverse biology going on it. If we could go to the next slide. So we want to document the practices spatially over her farm map. Cover cropping between fields are a good opportunity to provide N-rich green manure here without taking up too much space. Windbreaks are also going to reduce that wind-driven evapotranspiration. We can see which fields are at what stage of production. In field 1, Sally has begun cultivating. Field 2 and 3 are still in a pre-production condition and are being maintained by a cowpea cover crop that Sally had planted. And then on the next slide, we can see a timeline that provides more information. So we've been taking feedback from farmers on what additional tools we can provide to assist with implementation. You have the practice map, which communicates the proposed spatial placement, and we have written language just describing what each practice is, but it might still be difficult to take something on paper and actually implement it in the field. So for field 2, we made this visual timeline to try to close that gap between taking these larger spatial and generalized practices on paper and break them down into something that can be applied in field. So for field 2, it's in this pre-production stage, which is the red columns, and Sally's already dissed and put in cowpea, and we did the in-field soil health assessment and lab test together. And so this table proposed a series of management to follow what was listed in the soil health plan. But this would be an interactive process where like Sally and I would meet more to adjust the values. And we haven't had quite enough time to work through that all yet, but I know from our last meeting that the cowpea has begun to get aphids, so we could detail out replacing that with a mix of like a legume grass broadleaf mix to reduce the pest pressure while still continuing to fix nitrogen in her soil. And then when she's ready to cultivate, she can test her soil fertility for amendment recommendations and terminate and incorporate those cover crops and let them break down for a few weeks. And then she'd want to test for fertility at that point. And then while she's doing that, she can plant her windbreaks and start her green mulch strips. She can also go through her crop rotation and then reset with a cover crop mix at the end of the year. And so taking a look for any change in her soil, Sally can do another IFSHA just to assess where some of the certain attributes that we saw from our first test and from the soil test, just to reassess and see if those resource concerns still exist at that time. So we saw, that low aggregate stability. Sally can retest this by submerging clods in a sink strainer into a cup of water and seeing how long it stays together or falls apart. And I believe we have some videos of this on Tavuti in the soil health cohort, but we can continue to retest this maybe every year, and it's an easy at-home thing. Also, I believe people who are attending this call today and answering the poll questions that India is inputting will be entered to win a Solvita test kit, which measures that microbial respiration rate. And that's another thing you can potentially do on farm, be testing your own improvements in soil health, as well as retesting another soil health test with the University of Hawaii, and you can reach out to them for recommendations on testing intervals. It'll all kind of depend on soil and what management you're changing. But having a timeline laid out can help with implementation, farm planning, and record keeping. If this schedule works, Sally can take the same management and apply it as she continues to bring fallow land into production. And hopefully the time put in developing this template will make it easier down the line. So Sally, if you want to share what you think of this timeline or any other things that you'd want to be included, like additional details or how to make it better.
I think, someone getting started in this, like not to feel overwhelmed, I feel like that's a really good start. I'm sure there's things that can be added over time. And like, as I'm figuring out my farm systems, like so maybe certain things I would like kind of reach out. I think it'd be kind of like a working plan. But for me, I think it's a good start. I want to touch on the living roots. We have been kind of experimenting with keeping kind of tarping over some of the crops after we harvest it and leaving the roots in. And what I'm finding is, as long as there's water still going underneath it, the microbial life is stoked. And I really like, it's a little bit more time, but I feel like that's also a practice we're going to be implementing on large scale as much as we can too in the future. So I'm not sure if there's a way to kind of, I know that's going to be something we're going to have to build in, like these extra regenerative practices are going to have to be factored into our planning, and kind of the rotation of things are going to change a little bit with that. But other than what I see there, I feel like having alternatives for cover crops if we do run into an issue, because we are a new farm, is really nice. Alternatives are nice, I guess, and not being overwhelmed when I look at it, that I can actually like realistically make sense of this stuff. Just, I don't think a lot of people are coming from a soil health background. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comment on the cover cropping goes really well with our next slide. So just to complement this practice timeline, we made this cover crop variety selection table, which we'll share with everyone on the call today, based on the soil health goals and management challenges at your farm, Sally. So for the fallow fields, keeping them under that mix of legume, broadleaf, and grass cover will help suppress weeds while improving soil function and reducing the aphid pressure you've begun experiencing, while still, getting the nitrogen fixing from a different leguminous cover crop. And so you can use, you can reference this to go through the different attributes, and that might change over time what's most important to you. But we made this table from information from University of Hawaii's cover cropping page, which is cited on the PDF version I'll send out to you guys. But Sally, you could either use this on your own to work through different seed mixes, or we could also meet again to talk through and come up with a mix to try this together. And then I'll go through, I believe, one more slide, India. Another tool that we can help develop to consider practices and weigh decision making is working through a cost benefit analysis. And this is something that Megan's going to go through in more detail, but I ran through a simple economic analysis for the pigeon pea practice described in the soil health plan. And this is a framework that producers can look at to see if you can afford this cost right now, and weigh other values. And so the other benefits that can be considered in these analyses is what Megan will go to next. But just to kind of wrap up, these plans are largely based on the soil health lab test results. And we also then take in those field observations, develop goals, and create spatial designs and practices. And as I said before, Sally and I have only been able to meet once in the field and a second time to review some of the soil health plans, but we could spend a whole lot more time going deeper into detailing out these timelines, integrating economic decision tools, and implementing, making specific designs for implementation. And so India is going to post a poll to see what all the farmers on this call think. We want to know, what level of detail would you like to see in these plans? Is having detailed information helpful? And is it worthwhile participating in generating these resources together? Because it also takes a lot of the farmers' time to work through with us on this. And I just want to say thank you again, Sally, for lending us your ears and your time and your land to come out and work through this process together.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I see a few people have filled out the poll. Can everybody see it? Can you reply either via chat or just to start to populate the poll? I think what you said, Sally, was so important that it can be overwhelming, and a soil health lens is something that we can overlook. But as we said at the beginning of this call, the ultimate goal is healthy crops. And it's just easy to kind of troubleshoot, am I not having the nutrient cycling that I should have because of, compaction, or I don't have the microbial diversity, or maybe I don't have, a certain, that's where the nutrients might come over, right? I might have a mineral imbalance, I might be missing molybdenum or cobalt. So it's just basically, there's a lot there, and we want to find out, what level of detail would you want in a soil health plan? You might say, what, everything is so site specific. I don't really need you to really spend the time with me to come up with a timeline of how I'm going to move this fallow land into production and what practices I'm going to do on this field. Or I don't really need your help thinking about rotating between field 2, 3, and 1, but just give me those lab results. Help me kind of think of some really low cost, simple monitoring that I can do, maybe with my phone, maybe some of those in-field soil health assessments we did during the second workshop. And Louisa just mentioned a simple one is water stable aggregate. So, a lot of this is reading your land, getting more information. So getting those lab results, really kind of having that lens to look at, if you're seeing carbon and nitrogen imbalances, if you're seeing low microbial activity, if you're seeing compaction layers, if you're having slow water infiltration, or if you're having a difficulty holding on to nutrients or, water holding capacity. So all of this is just really just more information to help you look at your land from that lens. And so has everyone had a chance to fill this out? Because the poll is really helpful. And, also I threw out something kind of specific that I haven't before, which is like, do you want to plan for just 2023? That kind of gets into what you're going to do seasonally and just looking at that year, or do you want a bigger picture? Do you want to look at, I have these lab results and it's showing that, I have pretty low carbon compared to what I thought, or low microbial activity. And I want to systematically plan to improve that, but I think it's going to take me 3 to 5 years and give me a plan of something to shoot for that's kind of big picture, 3 to 5 years. So I don't know if you guys were able to see that first poll I did. That was really helpful to see the timeline. Like, would you want a 2023 plan more detailed in 1 year, or would you want kind of a 5-year plan? Would you want it to be just for one field? We had a soil health plan that we presented for Oahu farmers, and one of the farmers said, you know what, really similar to you, Sally. They said, I'm gonna be opening up fallow land and bringing it into production for them. It was tree crops, and I want to get a design down because I'm going to keep copying that. But I want to tweak it and I want to learn from it. And they were going to do some strip tilling. They were going to put perimeter windbreaks up. They were also going to put infield windbreaks up. They were going to cover crop in between, cover crop the tree rows first in preparation to plant. That was going to be terminated. They were going to do a different type of cover crop for a different goal, which was cover cropping on the sides of both beds as an infield windbreak and as a source of organic matter and a green mulch. So they were going to do that with Sudan and just have that maintained. They were going to intercrop with pigeon pea as their source. And then, so basically that was an example. If they wanted a design for one field, they wanted a timeline for multiple practices, and they wanted to copy that field design, refine it, and then do that as they open up more land into production. So that was moving fallow land into production, but other people can't really afford to keep fallow land out of production. So they might look at quick things that they can do. During our last session from Ted and Kunhui, we heard, what is your plan for increasing organic matter level? If you guys get your soil health plans back and you see that that is something that you would add to a goal, like you're showing different indicators that that is low and that needs to be improved, then your plan might focus on just improving organic matter. And are you going to do that through cover crops? Or are you going to do that through compost? And what are the pros and cons of each? And what can you afford now? What are your resources? So basically, we just want to know how much level of detail you want us to get into, what's helpful. You've got so many different hats you have to wear. So where do you want the help? So we're on time, and I was just going ahead and trying to plug a little bit of that in as we fill out this poll. But I'd like to welcome Megan next. And Megan, if you can introduce yourself, she's going to dive a lot more deep into just one tool. So we talked about timelines, we talked about maps. She's going to dive into cost. Can you afford this practice now, or should you do it later? How do you prioritize practices? Is this practice even going to give you your results and be worth it? Or how do you compare between one practice and another? So, basically you've got it until you get into actually implement it, and then you can get stuck on different things. And so we're trying to get into the weeds with you guys. And this is really delving in. Megan's talk is looking at how you do cost benefit, how you weigh those, how do you determine if a soil health practice is right for you right now. And then we'll move on. But Megan, if you can go ahead and start and give us a nice introduction to what we'll be learning together.
I'm sorry, but before Megan starts, I believe Camille has her hand up if we want to take
Okay.
questions. I'm not sure, is she able to speak?
Oh yeah, Camille, let's allow you to talk. And I'm gonna try to ask everyone, to interact, because we have time, we have a small group, and this is really everyone thinking about how this applies to your own operation, learning from each other. So Camille, are you able to ask your question, or?
I'm trying to. Can you hear me okay?
You sound good.
Okay. I just wanted to point out, because you asked if we could see the poll in the chat, but I just wanted to say that chat wasn't enabled, so we couldn't view the poll in chat.
Okay.
Yeah, if that mattered to you.
No, this is good. Could you guys see it at all? Sorry, this is.
I personally could see the poll. It came up on the screen as a pop-up, but I couldn't access chat. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, this is good. Hey, we have room for Q&A. Do you guys have any other questions for Sally? Do you have any questions for Louise? Like, what if you get a high bulk density, on your test? what do you want to talk through? This is why we're doing this as a cohort, to hopefully learn from each other. And Erin, do you have any, I saw you're talking unmuted, but yeah, is there any, we have time for a brief Q&A if there's the interest.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Excuse me. Hi, my name is Freddie. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound good, Freddie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just from what I've been listening to and understanding on ours is definitely site specific, but we are going to work with a fallow field, and so we're going to be starting off with some kind of cover crop, or maybe even some kind of cover crop living mulch. So I'm definitely just interested in trying to figure out ways how do we establish these living cover crops that will last, and then that can be interplanted inside of them.
Hi, Freddie. Is everyone able to hear okay? Yeah, I think so. I think this is a good, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a really good example of the level of detail that happens. If we gave you a plan that said do cover crops, it's such a huge array of what you would do. You are in a system that you might want a perennial ground cover, or you might want a long-term cover crop, or you might want to not even do a cover crop. You might want to just plant, different species like pigeon pea that are kind of considered more a source of green mulch. And those might be your source of nitrogen, but you might want to make sure that you have cobalt and molybdenum in the system so that you can have what you need to have the nitrogen fixing microbes do their work. So you might also want to look at your soil health test and make sure that you have the enzyme indicating that nitrogen cycling is in the system through the microbe. And you might want to also look at if you have any compaction layers, and you might also want to look at, if your carbon to nitrogen ratio is, do you have a lot of carbon in your system, especially if you're in an agroforestry system, at what point is nitrogen being immobilized? So I think this is a really good, example of the type of questions that you would have in your plan. So if we gave you a plan, Freddie, it'd be good to have this kind of understanding of your resource concerns and some of your main priorities. So your priority in the system that you have might be, what is my nitrogen source? What's the best way to make sure that I'm actually getting nitrogen in the system? What can I test for? How do I make sure that's happening?
Yes, absolutely. That is exactly what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it's possible in a system that we work such a high drop carbon system on the ground that you have to be immobilizing nitrogen because there's microbes being utilized too much to break down nitrogen by hand. So it's very. And I don't have, I'm not sure if Paul is on the call or not. So these are things that we would like to, do together, but just as one half of the representation that I have to offer.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think this is a very good example of how to look at it through a whole system, because everything's interrelated. Do I have enough carbon in my system to be feeding the, it's looking at all of this together. And that's why we need a plan. And that's why individual practices are good to start with. But ideally, I think all of us, it'd feel a lot better if we had a plan and we knew what we're trying to work towards and what we're trying to monitor towards. So you might be monitoring, what's happening with your nitrogen in your system, and how much is becoming plant available. And as Ted mentioned during our last workshop, don't be afraid to do the tissue test, and also just look at what's being uptaken into your plants. And so I think the soil health plan, again, is drawn on different types of information, and you still need your observations, but it's just exciting to hear from all of you, like, how can this give me a bigger picture? Because I'm having pest pressure, I'm having nutrient deficiencies. Why? What can I look at? We are having a little bit of breaking up, and I'm hoping that maybe as we turn our images off and just kind of get ready for the next session, that will be able to hear okay. Please feel free to use the chat, but Freddie, thank you for providing such a good contextual example of some of the issues that farmers and everyone, as you know, a cohort of farmers, of different issues that you're trying to manage for and what you need help with, and how the soil health plan might help you move towards that. So Megan, if I can go ahead and have you start, and please use the chat if you guys are not able to hear. I know we're having some connection issues, so being able to hear is really important.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, hopefully my voice doesn't get too robotic, but hello everyone. I'm Megan Gonzalez. I work with ORCD on a lot of the soil health work and conservation planning. Nice to be here with you guys tonight, and it was great to hear about your plan, Sally, and all of your feedback on it. But yeah, I'll begin. So like India and Luis mentioned, I'll be presenting on how to do cost benefit analysis for soil health practices and how to customize it for your operation. So I'll begin with just a quick introduction on partial budgeting with T-charts. And this is a method that NRCS uses for doing cost benefit analysis. And it just provides an easy way to visualize the costs and benefits of a practice. And then you can take it a step further and assign dollar values to those costs and benefits to have a quantitative analysis. So to tie this into Sally's plan a bit and a decision that she needs to make with her cover cropping, we're going to be focusing on cover cropping for this cost benefit analysis. And here I've just added a T-chart that's filled out for cover crops, and NRCS has these available online for most of the conservation practices, and they're just a good resource when you're trying to identify costs and benefits for a practice you're considering implementing on your farm. But now we'll get into the steps for doing a quantitative analysis on your farm and kind of just how to think about it and move through these steps. So the first step, like I said, is just listing all of those positive effects and negative effects. And again, you can use the NRCS T-charts for ideas, but you also want to think about how to adapt them to your farm. So I've just listed some positive and negative effects that I pulled from the NRCS example here. And then next slide, we'll just go through these slides quick. And then the next step is just to quantify them, give them a dollar value. And that's really where things take a bit more work. And oftentimes you'll have to make a lot of assumptions in this step, and you might not be able to quantify every cost and benefit. But in the next slides, we'll go through some methods that you can use and also just things that you should be thinking about throughout the process when you're trying to quantify them. So here are all those benefits for cover crop listed again. And I think India will be putting out a poll soon, but on this step, you want to take a step back and think about the benefits that you're measuring, what your soil health goals are, and what some of your biggest operational costs are. And that will help lead you to what benefits you might want to put a higher value on. Like not all of these benefits are going to be applicable to every farm or carry the same weight. So maybe all of these benefits even apply to you, but one has a more significant impact on your farm. So for example, we have weed suppression listed as a benefit here. Maybe weed suppression is something you're spending way too much time on, and so you really value the weed suppression that cover cropping offers. And so you would want to focus on that value or that benefit to get an accurate value for the savings associated with that benefit. And then again, we'll talk about the methods for calculating those values and how to get them more accurate. But For another example, going back to what Luis mentioned earlier about how Sally is having issues with aphids on her cowpea, reduced pest pressure is another benefit of cover cropping that I don't even have listed here. But if Sally was going to go through this process, that would definitely be a benefit she wanted to list, and then spend some more time figuring out how to assign a dollar value to it. And then in the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the methods we can use to assign that dollar value. And I don't want to spend too much time going through each of these methods, but again, the slides will be available after this, so you'll be able to reference the methods that we use. But for this slide, I'll focus on weed suppression. So for weed suppression, we have 2 different methods listed for how to quantify them. And if you use herbicide, you could just measure the value of the benefit by the amount you save in herbicide costs. I know that, I think that most people here are using manual weeding or mowing as their main form of weed management. So another way you could look at this is how much time you save on not having on that labor. So since if weed suppression is something that you feel is a really big operational cost, it's worth it to just take a little bit extra time to get an accurate measurement or accurate cost to assign to this value. So next time you mow or weed, you can just get your phone out and set a timer and do a time study and see how long it actually takes you to mow an acre, half an acre. And then you can use that when you're calculating this benefit. Like if you had that acre cover cropped, maybe you wouldn't spend 2 hours mowing it, and that's like $40 that you could assign to this. And then next slide. And then here we have some more methods for quantifying the reductions in fertilizer needs. And that can be quantified by the decrease in nitrogen leaching, or you can look at it as how much nitrogen contribution the cover crop is giving you by using the cover crop calculator, which we have available on our website. And I'll talk about that more later in the presentation. But we also have here some benefits that we don't have methods for quantifying. And a lot of times that'll make a really big difference in your cost benefit analysis. It's fairly easy to get the costs and identify costs. Most of the time it just requires looking at receipts or Googling and getting an estimate for the cost of materials. But for benefits, there's a lot that are a bit harder to quantify. But here we have, for example, nematode suppression. And if nematode suppression is a really big issue on your farm, or nematodes are, maybe you lost a whole field because of nematodes, or you had to rotate your beds prematurely and you didn't get as much production from one bed as you thought you were going to because it got attacked by nematodes, then you would have a method for quantifying that variable. You could look at how much you might have made if you didn't lose that crop to nematodes, and then that would be the value of that benefit. Next slide.
And just to come in really quick, I saw on the poll, a lot of you were really interested in the nitrogen contributions, not just from plant available nitrogen from a specific crop, but also the reduction in the loss of N, or the immobilization of it, volatilization, leaching. We do have videos on that. We can dive into that later. This is a side note because it's not the purpose of the talk, but I just wanted to let you guys know that we can send you those links.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and then here we just have all the costs listed. And again, those are pretty straightforward, and you can just start up an Excel sheet and include all of these variables we have listed here. And maybe there's more that we haven't considered. But it might seem like unnecessary work, but once you have that Excel sheet going, it's really easy to edit it a little bit, and then you can use it for a lot of different cost benefit analysis. So I know that a lot of you are looking for ways to increase nitrogen in your soil, or might not have a accessible source for nitrogen. So maybe you want to look at sun hemp as a cover crop, but then compaction is also an issue on your farm. So you might be considering a deep rooting cover crop like radish. You can use this once you have that Excel sheet done, then you already have the cost. You might have to change it a bit for the different seed costs between radish and sun hemp. But then when you're looking at the benefits side, you just spend a little bit more time quantifying the nitrogen benefit for sun hemp by using the cover crop calculator to get an accurate value on the nitrogen contributions. And then for the compaction, looking at the radish, maybe you usually rip your soil twice a year, but would only do it once if you implemented the radish cover crop. So for that benefit, you'll just look at how much you'll save by not needing to rent and operate the subsoiler, or maybe do a time study for how long it takes to rip, so that you can include the cost of labor that you'll save in that benefit. And then it'll give you a really clear idea of which cover crop species would be most beneficial for your operation. And then now we'll go through an example that we actually did with an Oahu farmer. Oh wait, sorry. Now here are just the methods for quantifying the costs. Again, these are pretty straightforward, just getting the cost of cover crop seed and then the cost of establishing it. Like if you're going to use a no-till drill, which might not be realistic, maybe you're going to hand broadcast and you want to do a time study. And then maintenance cost, you want to look at what the water requirements are for that cover crop, how much you're going to irrigate, and the labor that will be required to maintain it. And then finally, what method you're going to use for termination, and either how long that will take or how much it will cost to rent that equipment you'll need to terminate. Okay, and then here's the example. And yeah, we did this with an Oahu farmer in our last cohort, and they wanted to look at how cover crops could help reduce their weed pressure and compaction on their operation. So we got a few costs from them, and these are listed on those bullet points. So a cost for a no-till drill was about $250 an acre, and then they were spending $200 an acre annually on herbicide. And then they had to rip the soil as well because it was compacted. That was costing about $250 an acre per year as well. So for weed suppression, we calculated that as a reduction in herbicide application, and that was only $66 an acre. For reduced compaction, we calculated that as not needing to rip 1 acre, so $250. Minimizing erosion was based off of the nutrients that they didn't lose, and we have that calculation in a past slide. And then reduced fertilizer needs by looking at a reduction in nitrogen leaching. We also have that calculation in the past slides. But overall, we got that the total benefits added up to $1,054 for 2 acres being cover cropped. So around $527 an acre. And then their total costs were $1,774. So even though this is a really useful way to look at costs and benefits, it doesn't account for all factors. As you can see here, there's quite a few benefits that we didn't quantify, and then there's also a few costs that we didn't quantify. And then again, this will also change for each operation. So here we only have $66 an acre value for weed suppression, but let's say you have 2 acres of guinea grass there and you don't use herbicide, you manually weed or you mow, and you have to mow those 2 acres 6 times a year. It takes you 4 hours each time. Then your value for weed suppression would be much higher, like around $360 an acre compared to the 66 we have here. And then next slide. Yeah, so basically want to just focus on making sure that the value you're assigning makes sense to you and your operation. Like if weed suppression isn't a big deal, then maybe, and you don't spend much time on it, it's not a big operational cost, then maybe $66 an acre is kind of accurate for you. But if that's one of the tasks that you're spending the most time and putting the most labor hours towards, then it's going to be valued a lot higher than that. Maybe compaction isn't an issue on your farm at all. You have really sandy soil, you've never had to rip, then you might have a lower value for that benefit. But yeah, we wanted to kind of turn this into more of a discussion at this point and just hear your guys' feedback on like, are these, do you feel like this is an accurate representation of how much it costs, or how valuable the benefits of cover cropping are? Or do you feel that there's variables that are being underlooked or undervalued? Yeah, and then also, how would you place a value on these variables that we don't have quantified? Is increased soil biological activity really important for you, or does it not have much of an impact when you're making a decision like this?
So I unmuted everybody and we can see how the reception, like how we can hear and how well everything comes through. But, you know, Sally, just to put this in context, you know, we were just mentioning how, you know, CalP can be a host for aphids, and everyone who attended the session with Ted and Kunhui, that was, you know, one of our talks, and how to use CalP more strategically, not leave it in very long, use it for some nitrogen source, but don't allow it to stay in. But I mean, it's asking you if you're going to really pull that CalP out and terminate that right now, it's providing good weed suppression. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sally, but I think you had it in for 2 years, and that was 2 years that you weren't mowing and you didn't have guinea grass growing in there. It had been seeded densely enough. But I mean, it's a big risk if we say, hey, why don't you kind of terminate that, spend the money to work it into the ground, spend the money to prep that field, spend the money on new cover crop seed and cover crop with something else, you know, if you're not ready to put that into production. What's that cost benefit to you? Like how would you start to look at, like, you know, the aphid impact? I mean, I guess maybe you would start with, am I seeing aphids on my crops and how much of my crops am I losing? But as far as bringing this discussion up, can we use this as a context? Like, how would you start looking at, you know, reduced aphid pressure, and when does that warrant, you know, that you might spend some extra money on your cover crop? Or maybe it's scary for you to use cover crops because of the pest pressure and you just want to use compost, and what does that look like? But yeah, any thoughts, Sally, or anybody else? Like,
Yeah, I've only been here for 9 months, actually. So for me, we just terminated a section of it that's closest by. I'm gonna see if that helps. But we do have a lot of stuff in the wind, I think, that travels. I think what we're gonna do is, like, we're opening up another area for more production, but I think we're gonna terminate and try another since we are so new. But additionally, a lot of my crops don't stay in the field long enough that the ones I'm seeing the aphid pressure with, that it's that big of an issue to me. It's a pretty quick turnover with the demand. So I'm, in my mind, the CalP for what it did in kind of taking the place of guinea grass and allowing there to be nitrogen and just organic matter kind of outweighed. And it is a cover crop I'm going to stick with. I just might do more of a cocktail now that I have irrigation set up. Being so new, like, we just went with something that we thought would work without there being irrigation set up. But, you know, that's kind of why I need my plan to be more flexible, because it is a new farm and things are constantly changing. But for me, I'm not really sure. I think that we're going to stick with the cover crop thing. I'm not going to go to compost, mainly because I'm on Kauai and there's just shit compost here. And until I can make my own source, I don't think buying cover crop outweighs that right now, especially the cost of the compost and what it what you're getting for quality here. So yeah, that's, someone else can take over.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else to add? Like,
Yeah, I have something to add. I just wanted to ask Sally, on her field, which I know, or excuse me, on her farm, and I know she said she's just been there for 9 months, and the cowpea had been there before. I wonder if there, and part of the soil health thing you're doing, if there was one that was that cowpea inoculated, and I think that's one of the ones that maybe needs to be. And then, are you, and I'm assuming you are with the help of these guys here, are you going to be like testing the soil to see your baselines of nitrogen, and then after this new cover crop, seeing, you know, what you need to add soil wise? And I was also going to ask if you had any interest in that tissue sampling to see what your plants, no matter what's in the soil, no matter, to see what your plants are actually uptaking.
So
Sorry about that.
no, that's fine. The cover crop we planted about a month or two after we got here. So it wasn't inoculated. I'm trying to answer all your questions, sorry. And I am interested in the tissue testing. There was one other question you had. Shoots, I don't know what your other question was, but
I was just wondering, because, you know, to see how much I'm just very interested in decreasing nitrogen for myself, adding it, you know, bringing in nitrogen from other areas, and very interested in this cover crop thing. So I'd love to see the quantification of the reduction of nitrogen fertilizer input, and also loss of leaching of, you know, any other nitrogen that may be in the soil already, or soluble nitrogen.
So I'm
If you
working with
use
another
insoluble nitrogen.
initiative too that took a baseline of my soil before anything was done. And then every year we're going to kind of get together and like kind of assess and see, like, based upon the practices we're doing, like, is there a change that's happening in the direction that I want it to, or what's going on? But we're still so new that like none of that's applicable yet. We're still just collecting data. But definitely took a baseline of everything here, of everywhere I plan to be for the next 5 years.
And what kind of crops are you growing there?
It's diversified ag. It's a lot of leafy greens right now and some root crops. And then we have a couple greenhouses for tomato production. And we have fruit trees as well.
Thank you.
this is great.
Add a little
And
bit,
oh yeah, yeah. And Amanda also asked if, I was just wondering if all the panelists can talk as well, because I think, Amanda, you asked if you're able to chat or to also participate. Sorry, Louise, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. I think panelists should be able to unmute. But I can add for the inoculation bit. Generally, most legumes are recommended to be inoculated, but some of the work from Dr. Wang, who has done a lot of research on cover crops in Hawaii, has said that in general, they're usually present in the soil. I think inoculation can help like speed up how well the nitrogen fixation performs, but I know I've heard her say that in general, some of the symbiotic bacteria, the rhizobacteria, are present in the soil. But also, just for trying to understand or quantify the rates of nitrogen being worked back into your soil when you plant a nitrogen fixing cover crop. So like that cover crop is going to be fixing nitrogen from the air for its own needs and for its own plant development. And then when you terminate it and cover it, that's when, through the just decomposition process, the tissues are broken back down, and that can be transformed from organic nitrogen back to inorganic nitrogen for plant uptake. And that's where those C to N ratios matter, because that is one way that we can tell like what the decomposition rate is expected to be, and so lower than that 24:1, depending on the cover crop. And some of these values are quantified, and so you can look it up for the species you're considering planting. If it's below 24:1, it's going to have a faster decomposition rate and release of that plant nitrogen, the organic nitrogen, back to inorganic nitrogen. And if it's higher, then it'll be slower. But no matter what, it's not going to compare to, like, applying a chemical fertilizer.
And so, yeah, so also just to tie some things on, our second workshop over at Ned's and Marta's at Mola Organica, we had Bob talk about how there is a window of time of when that nitrogen level is higher. So the earlier you terminate, and then Jensen is one of our CTAR extension agents over here on Oahu, and they just did a recent study on how to really make sure that you're integrating that nitrogen, because the chop and drop doesn't necessarily work unless you're integrating it into either the tree line or below the root zone, and how you really got to get it into small enough pieces and get it worked into the soil. And then I just talked to Amjad last week about inoculants, and he was just mentioning how we do have native nitrogen fixin bacteria, then the rhizobia. We do have native biology in the soil, but he said it doesn't hurt and it's cheap to buy the inoculant. And he mentioned one from Johnny's called Exceed. So yeah, I think this is all like an example of the level of detail that goes into just designing one practice, and then how do you put that into a plan, and how do you set that for a goal? So again, tying this back to a plan with you're getting the observations of some yellowing, you're getting the results of your soil health plan that really make you see that, hey, my nitrogen cycling in the system is low, or my design. So you're getting these other indicators, and then you might design a practice of, hey, one of my goals is to increase the amount of nitrogen in the system and balance out the amount of carbon to nitrogen in the system. And one of my practices is going to be using cover crops or perennial ground cover or a green mulch source. And this is the timeline I'm going to use. This is what I'm going to do to make sure. So there's quite a bit in just even identifying the practice you want to use. And then it's like, how to use that practice either intercropped in your field, or, how do you rotate if you're going to cover crop and rotate a whole block. So this is a level of detail that we're getting into, and this is why a plan is helpful. And so I'm going to move us on, if it's okay, unless anyone has anything else that they want to talk about. And, I'm also hearing that this might be a topic that we do a whole session on, that we just look at nitrogen sources in general. And there's a big discussion of how nutrient management does cross over with soil health, and understanding that as a bigger picture. But we would, I'm going to just pause for a second and see, is there any other questions? And Freddie, I think your hand is raised.
Yeah, sorry, and I don't mean to ask so many questions. It's very inquisitive. Specifically speaking, and I saw, because we had slides about the pigeon pea, is there, and I didn't notice that on any of the charts I've seen so far. Is there an estimation on the C/N ratio of that? And I guess also specifically of when you terminate or not. Seems like the plant grows to a specific height or age, and then that's kind of stays like that unless you chop it. And then also just wanted to add, when I was speaking about learning about how to create my own arbuscular mycorrhizae, there is an actual resource on the Rodale Institute online about, and that was done with Peter McCoy, about how to help small farmers create their own arbuscular mycorrhizae for use. So that's really cool. But specifically, yeah, the pigeon pea was my question.
Yeah, I don't know, Louise, if you have anything or anyone else on the talk. There is some resources on the site that our soil health talk with Joe Williams, where he gave some resources on the C to N ratio, and it does depend on when you terminate. I don't have anything specific, and I know it also depends on the variety of pigeon pea you're using, if it's bushy or what properties it has. But I think this is also a good headway to the fact that this is our second to last session. It's virtual, but our next our last session will be in person, and it was specifically on cultivated biology and looking at specific types of biology and the rhizosphere. And we have postponed that. So just to be clear, that is postponed till like mid-January. And the purpose of that is that we're working with Bob Schaefer to do an on-farm compost design with Kauai Community Ag Park, looking at their inputs, their deep litter system, and looking at how to do an aeration, how to add a PVC aeration pipe, and how to contain leachate, and how to work with DOH permitting and go through all the steps as a design. And so we are going to share that out as our last session. And we are going to also hopefully still have New come over and present on how to cultivate biology. And I'd also ask, any resources that you guys would like to share. That resource sounds great, Freddie and Sally. I think you mentioned that there's some resources that were shared with you also as part of the Climate Smart, the CSI, is it? The climate, I forget what program you're working with, because you're also working with a national organization to develop a soil health plan. And you'll have that to compare as well. Yeah, Louise, do you have anything to comment? And I want to keep us on track because we have Amanda and then Zephyr next, and then Amy and Jason presenting together.
Yeah, Freddie, I can send you the publication that I found from UH that I was referencing, but they have 2.5% nitrogen in their pigeon feed that was terminated at 14 weeks. So if it went longer, it'd probably be less of the biomass. I don't think they reported carbon, but I'll send you what I have. Thank you.
Amanda, are you ready to introduce yourself and share about how to finance some of our soil health practices? And is everybody able to see the screen? Is everybody able to hear? Yeah. We good?
Yeah, ready, India.
Thank you.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Nice to hear your voices and hear what's been going on in your exciting cohort there. I'm Amanda Shaw. I work with Oahu Agriculture and Conservation Association, OACA. I'm co-conspirator with others on the call. And in fact, some of what I'll be doing is kind of singing the praises of the NRCS folks programs, but we'll just, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, thanks. We'll just give you a little background about what our organization does, and then just some options for financing instruments that, some could be directly applicable to soil health, and some it's a little bit more tangential, but hopefully could support your farm overall. So OACA really focuses on mobilizing resources of different kinds for Hawaii's food and agriculture sector. A lot of what we do is focused on the financial side, helping farmers and ranchers and other producers access grants and loans. So we do free grant writing for producers. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us. We have also a biweekly funding newsletter that kind of lets folks know about the latest opportunities that are applicable to producers especially. So I'll have some info at the end. We also do some education and training, and we work a lot through partnerships. Next slide, please. So I wanted to see if there is, I think the chat is not much of an option, but let's see, India, and I don't think polls are kind of a little bit beyond what I was able to do, but I was kind of curious just for the group, are folks interested in grants, loans, or both? And maybe you could just unmute yourselves and just shout out loud if you're interested in grants or loans or both. That would be great to hear.
Hell yeah.
Get it, Cammy. Yeah.
Is that for both? All? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely both.
Both.
I'll take grants any day. Free money, give it to me.
Yeah. Anybody interested just in loans? That's usually what we see is kind of a crickets response on that one. Okay, fair enough.
Scary. We're scary.
Yeah. Anybody received a grant already, and you can just say yes. And if you want to say the funding agency, you can as well. More crickets, maybe. Nobody then?
I got a grant. It was a Safe and Stable grant during COVID when we were all shut down. And I think it was in partnership with Malama Kauai and North Shore EVP.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the group had any grant experiences?
I did
All
the NRCS High Tunnel program. I guess I don't know if that's really a grant, but I went through that.
Yeah, we kind of lumped it in. So we'll be talking about that program today. So great. We know who to pick on in that section. Thanks, Aaron. Anybody else received a grant? Okay, well, feel free to interrupt and tell us about your experience. Next slide, please. So, and then you can move on. We kind of like to talk a little bit about grant readiness because I think there's often some factors to consider. And one of them, I think maybe applicable as well to, especially to production side is just kind of like, what is your length of time in operation and what kind of track record do you have that you can demonstrate to somebody who might fund you? Second is kind of this, call it sort of the state of data, how much data are you able to capture and gather? Currently, are all your financial and production records pretty, up to date? Because having that sort of back office side squared away really facilitates being able to make the case in your applications and then, of course, to do your reporting. The third is kind of your business goals for your farm. And that one is tricky because one of the things that we see, and we'll talk about a little bit, is that sometimes the goals you have for your farm don't exactly meet the kinds of funding opportunities that are out there. And we'll talk a little bit about, kind of why that is and what's happening. The other, aspects to consider really are like, how are you going to manage the grant? Do you have the time and the systems in place to be able to, spend the money appropriately, document it, report back? And then, as I was saying, there's, the kind of types of opportunities that are available that may or may not be a fit for exactly what you want to do, but might cover a portion or might be, in some way related. And there's a different types of financing, different types of, not just grants, but other kinds of investments people might make in your business or your farm. And then assessing partnerships. I'd like to have folks also look at that, who are you already in relationship with, and what opportunities to mobilize financial resources might there be there. Next slide, please. So there's the kind of nuts and bolts of applying to federal grants. And I think some of you might have seen this if you've either participated or you've looked at some of these. We'll kind of move on from that because it's just kind of more nitty gritty, but there's some information there you can have on the slide. When we're looking at, I guess, the federal funding opportunities that are out there, of course, like the US government is the largest funder, so it's a great place to look, and we'll focus on that in this talk, although I do have a slide at the very end for you if you want to kind of look a little bit later at what some of the private foundation philanthropic funding looks like. But these are the kind of 5 or 6 or so types of grants, and I won't go much into those because I want to focus in on, we can do the next slide, focus in on the actual opportunities that might apply to you. And so we already had someone talking a bit about EQIP, this general program, and I'm sure the NRCS folks that are on can also tell us more too. But just, this is just such an incredible opportunity to access not only the assistance, the financial assistance, but the resources and knowledge of the team at NRCS locally. And so you can, qualify for actual payments for doing some of the kinds of conservation practices like the soil health practices you've been talking about that you're already doing on your farm. Next slide. Kind of taking that to a deeper level, there's the conservation stewardship program. It kind of helps you build on, the conservation efforts you're already doing and go into greater depth. So that might be kind of similar to what EQIP is doing, but kind of taking that a little bit further. Next slide. So the High Tunnel Initiative technically is, as Aaron was saying, had a chance to apply through that. This is a great opportunity we like to share that is through the EQUIP program, but we kind of like to signpost it separately since, you know, that isn't something that folks always know is available. So to implement a hoop house, it's a lot of benefits as well, and probably has some relationship to the work you folks are doing on soil health. Next slide. Rural Energy for America grant program. This is through the Rural Development Office. Now, the USDA Rural Development Office has a ton of programs for kind of beyond. It's not just agriculture, it's kind of for the rural community, for rural communities and rural businesses, rural small businesses in particular. And so this isn't technically about soil health, but you know, the way I look at it is if the resources can support your farm operation, whose overall goals include those kinds of practices, then for me, it kind of yeah, it's an opportunity to look at. So especially, you know, if you're thinking about implementing solar systems, if you're thinking about refrigeration, lights, if you're either going to implement or construct a new system, or you're going to upgrade an existing energy system, you'll need to be able to work with your energy professional relatively closely to get the information you need, but just to signpost that this is upcoming for the new year. So there's a chance to look at these for your farm projects if you're planning on any energy improvements. Next slide, please. Yeah, also just going to another, we're sort of cycling through the different branches of USDA, but the Farm Service Agency, if you're not, are folks already signed up generally? Maybe you can tell us, Louise and Co with FSA and India. Are most folks generally already signed up with FSA?
We haven't delved into this much because the focus is really on soil health, but I mean, we've talked about shipping and how expensive that is. We've talked about bulk buy-in with Annie. We've talked about different things that have been tried and how fast this budget can be used up. And I think we're interested in, yeah, just understand what it might look like in 2023. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and then, yeah, feel free to shout out if you're, are you folks, any of the folks on the call already signed up with FSA programs? Not hearing anything yet, so that's a great opportunity if folks haven't. Oh yeah, the Farm Service Agency. So they're kind of another very farm-facing organization that has a ton of programs, especially, you know, when things happen like natural disasters, droughts, other things that are coming up. They've got resources that they can share. So if you register with them, there's a whole process. And yeah, I would have gone a little bit more into that if I had, I thought maybe we'd have an FSA group already on the call, but I'm happy to follow up with some info on that. And of course, you can reach out directly to the team there. But one of the programs that's available for Hawaii farmers and ranchers is this reimbursement transportation cost. And, you know, I want to make the point that it's not a huge program. Like in 2022, they would only finance up to $8,000 in expenses. That was kind of the cap. So, you know, but I think any bit can help, especially if you're already able to keep your records and your receipts and things. You'll be keeping that for taxes anyway. And this is just kind of, you know, applying to this is relatively straightforward, not a huge amount of paperwork, and FSA team is really supportive. So that'll be upcoming in the new year. I'm not sure when that will open again. They just kind of closed that in September, as I understand it. But that could help to pay for the things that you're importing. So if you're importing fertilizers or seeds, it will also pay, not necessarily related to the soil health work, but if you're going to farmers markets, it can also pay for a portion of your fuel. So again, good programs out there. Next slide. I think, yeah, kind of what I was saying in the beginning about partnerships. Oftentimes, one of the biggest sources of wealth are the relationships we have. And so I think, of course, seeing this group and the work that Oahu RCMD provides, and know that there's been some stipends available for participating, and it's just various, resources that come through being in relationship with that organization. And the same is true for our work. We have a small grant that we do as part of the Together We Farm program that we run every year. It's a virtual training program. And so, I think just kind of doing an inventory of who the organizations are and the resources are that you're already in contact with, and thinking about what resources they might have to support your soil health work. Of course, you folks have talked a bit about extension and the kind of information resources they provide, and the opportunities maybe for participating in trials. There's other university faculty that might be working on some of these issues that may have grants to do innovative projects. There's also the soil and water conservation districts, which don't necessarily have a lot of resources for grants in that sense, but they are a space where you can develop a lot of relationships with other producers in your regions. Is anybody a member of a soil and water conservation district on Kauai? I'm not sure how many districts there are there. I think 2, if I'm not wrong. Maybe Louise and Kono. Yeah, so that's
I'm one of the directors. There's 2 on Kauai. There's the East and West.
That's okay. Thanks, Eric. Oh, nice to see your name. Yeah, great. So yeah, reach out to Eric, I guess. I'll punt that one to you, just to to be in touch with kind of what's happening, but also just great resources if you're doing soil health work and conservation work. The districts are great resources for that. Next slide.
Amanda, are there any resources to just be a contractor on someone else's grant, or any matching resources? So say you just want to be a demonstration site, is there any kind of help to find out how you can be part of someone's greater grant and not have to administer and apply for it yourself?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is like, your the opportunities, that you have to be a sort of either what they would call a sub-awardee to get a piece of the pie in your name, or to be a subcontractor where you would just invoice a grant for the services provided. Those all kind of, a lot of those are word of mouth and relationship based. So there's not necessarily a central location where folks are listing the opportunities to be part of, soil health field trials or innovation grants. But I think it's kind of about how you mobilize the network you're a part of. And I'll kind of return to that in a slide or two, because that's a really important point. Thanks for mentioning it. Just kind of, again, still on the sort of relationships and opportunities that are out there. The counties as well have some economic development programs. We know that some counties are pretty friendly to ag. I'm not sure so much about Kauai and what opportunities there might be there, but it's something to kind of keep in mind, that they sometimes do have small grants. Some programs we're still not sure what's going to happen with. I'm sure maybe folks on this call have more latest info. I guess we're all waiting for the change of guard at HGOA to see what opportunities there might be in the cover crop pilot program that was funded in the legislature. There's also a large community climate smart commodity project that will be doing some form of producer incentive payments. And that'll be a second round that will be available for application. So I think that's something folks can just keep an ear out for, and hear through the Oahu RCMD team as well, since they'll be a part of that as well. And then just another opportunity that's currently ongoing that relates hopefully to bolstering the infrastructure there is around maybe fertilizers locally. There's a large USDA program, fertilizer product expansion, that's happening in December 29th. So you can also sort of put the word out amongst your networks to see if any companies or organizations are planning to go for this. We've heard of at least one on Oahu that is hoping to apply. And often, these are the times when people get together and decide to hooey up and go for funding. So next slide.
Oh, real quick, because fertilizer is such an issue, is this for farmers or for organizations? So say, there's not a source of tankage on Kauai, or they want to find another a source Yeah, can you explain a little more?
Yeah,
Because
of
this is a hot
course.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a large, nationally competitive fertilizer expansion program. Basically, they've decided they want to fund, the expansion of that infrastructure precisely for the kinds of goals that you folks are all working towards. So, in order to gain access to that money, you'll have to be able to demonstrate that you can really have an impact across Hawaii at least. And so I haven't looked at the RFP recently, but we did hear about one company that's thinking about applying. So I think just kind of like hearing through the Coconut Wireless, if anybody is looking at this, usually for these large federal grants, and I don't remember the funding amount for this specifically, but they're quite a heavy lift. So you'd often need like a lead applicant that has kind of a track record. And if not with this specific federal grant, having done other federal grants, or, maybe some of these companies, it's new for them, but they have a really broad reach. So this wouldn't be the type of thing an individual producer could apply for. This would be something that if you have a relationship with some of the companies that are applying for it, or you're part of a partnership that somehow, you get into that. But it's just, these are the kinds of things that kind of just wanted to flag are happening so that, if you do hear more about it, yeah, it's a good opportunity. So yeah, I think the takeaways are to really befriend the wonderful USDA folks, and NRCS is fantastic, FSA, rural development. If you're not signed up with FSA, have a look and consider it. They've got funding out there for lots of programs. I've also included a link in the PowerPoint that will be shared with you folks to the Ag Training Hui. There's a bunch of business services, and it breaks down for you which services are offered by which group, so you don't have to do all that work of looking through. There's just one flyer. And so that's when I say, like, kind of getting grant ready. If there are things you need to do on the business development side in order to be ready to apply for grants, that's a good place to start. You're welcome to sign up for our bi-weekly funding newsletter, and to reach out to us if you want to do one-to-one calls to talk about your funding goals. We can help with that. And yeah, this is the last piece. Go for the low-hanging ulu, continue to build the relationships that you're already doing through things like this cohort. So yeah, some additional slides for your info that India can share, but that's all I've got. Thanks, India. Those are just a little piece on, private funding and stuff that folks can have a look at afterwards if they need to.
This is great. Thank you so much. Yeah, really, we can overlook funding sources, and I like your attitude, Camille. Camille, like, get all that help we can get. Okay, I think just to stay on task and just to stay on, Amanda, that was really great. It was, yeah, and I think the drive home message is just like, get signed up with FSA, get signed up with USDA, create partnerships, create that kind of, I mean, I don't know if Sally's still on, but Sally has really reached out a lot to some national partners, and, it really is kind of being an advocate for yourself. And we'd love to support you in any ways we can. And so I think this next talk is with Zephyr, and I don't know if Jenna is present as well, but this is kind of representing the Kauai office. And so Zephyr, can you please introduce yourself and what you'll speak on? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, India. And I just wanted to ask real quick, how much time do I have for this
So
section?
we're gonna end at 6 o'clock, and so we had like not quite 15 minutes, and then again, to finalize with Amy and Jason, not quite 15 minutes. If we have to, we could, but it'd be nice to leave a little time for Q&A at the end. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. All right, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm my name's Zephyr Usinger, and I'm working with NRCS, Department of Agriculture, as Amanda just talked about. And so if you don't know, we are an agency of the federal government. And we have programs that part of it is technical assistance, where we go out to people's sites and we do environmental assessments. We figure out what environmental concerns there are. And then what we can do is provide recommendations for practices, create conservation plans that address those environmental concerns. And then what we're going to talk about today are the financial assistance programs that help you to pay for those practices. So you can go to the next slide. And so this is a list of some of the programs that we work with. Predominantly, most of our contracts are with EQIP, which is Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And then the other main program that we have that works a little differently is the CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program. But there are other programs available as well. And but those are the two that we typically work with. So you can go to the next slide. And so there's kind of 5 steps from when you first contact NRCS to when you actually put the conservation work on the ground and get paid for those practices. So it goes from planning, application, basically paperwork, and then we rank all of the applications to decide who gets funded first, and then those applications that are selected then sign contracts and go from there. So we'll go through those steps at the next slide. So first step, it's the best step, most fun, it's the planning. And so you'll contact myself, you can call the office, leave a voicemail, talk to us, and basically we schedule a site visit. We come out to your farm, ranch, forest land, and we create goals, or we work together to figure out what goals you have, what vision you have for your land, and look at, what kind of environmental concerns there might be, erosion, soil quality, things like that, and then figure out what practices would work best for your land. We help to create both, kind of this ideal option, but then also look at alternatives and see what is realistic for your operation, and then determine, we have lists of what we pay for each practice, and we decide if, just like we had the cost benefit analysis earlier, you can determine, okay, you pay, $100 and something per acre for cover crop, incorporate that into your cost benefit and decide if that works for you. And so we pay a set rate per practice. So it's, or per, so it'd be per acre, linear feet, number of trees, things like that. But we'll go to the next step. So the next step is the paperwork side. And so there's an application deadline, and then there's eligibility. And so the application is very simple form. It basically just says, who you are, where your land is, and the programs that you're interested in signing up for. And they're accepted year round, but there are deadlines for meeting, for fitting into the bigger timeline of each year of funding. And so for this year, our deadline is November 18th. So it's coming up next week, Friday. And so, so that's for EQIP and AMA, which includes the high tunnel, and then a lot of our main program for creating those conservation plans and practices. And then February is the deadline for the CSP program. And so that's, so if you can do that any time of the year you're interested, just let me know. And then the eligibility step is when we work together with FSA basically to get you into our system. And so we need more information from you. We need to know, do you have control of the land? Do you own it? Do you lease it? Is there, are you applying as a business, a nonprofit? Who all are the members of that? And then also you need to be, with the financial assistance, you need to make less than $900,000 a year. So that's a consideration. We're not giving money to people that make more than that. And so we'll go to the next step. A few more steps with that one. And then for step 4, so step 4 is the ranking. And so this, this aspect of the programs is basically we need to figure out, we have all these different fund pools available. And so we have things that are based off of national level, state level, more county level. And these different fund pools have different priorities. And so the ranking process, we take the plan that we've created with all the practices that are best for your operation and where you're at this point. And we look at what practices you're doing. We're looking at what resource concerns you have and how that fits into the priorities of these different fund pools. And so as Amanda mentioned, there's a high tunnel initiative. So for that, there's a whole fund pool that's just for high tunnels. There's also fund pools that look at local fund pool, and that's where some of the SWCD, the Soil Water Conservation District, makes their priorities for that. And so we have this software that we use that takes into account all the practices, the resource concerns, all of that, and spits out a number. And so we have this list of everyone that applied, everyone gets a number. The people that are at the top of the list get funded first, and then whoever decides to go forward with funding gets funded. If people at that point cancel, that money gets shifted around. Sometimes it's can get shifted from other counties to here if they're state fund pools. So that's kind of a big part of the timeline as well. So we'll go to the next slide, and that should show the next step, which is if you get selected for funding, then you decide whether you want to proceed or not. And this is really important to have that cost benefit in mind. How much is it going to cost for you to implement all these practices? What we're going to do is we're going to create a contract, and it's going to say, this is how you're going to do each practice. These are the standards that NRCS has for each thing. And then we're going to use these species for the cover crop. We're going to have the mulch be at 4-inch depth in this area. And we have a timeline. So it says the first year you're going to do this, second year you're going to do that, third year you're going to do this. And then and there's a very specific payment amount for each of those practices. And so what'll happen is, for example, if you're applying mulch to your orchard, you would apply the mulch, you'd call us, you'd say, oh, I did the mulching, can you come out? One of us would come out, we'll measure it, say it looks good, take pictures, and then at that point you get paid for that practice. So it's after the fact kind of payment. So it's same thing with like the high tunnel and all of that. You put in the seed money, and then afterwards you get that specific pay rate that we offer as a deposit to your account. What else do I want to say about this? Yeah, I think that looks good. So we can go to the next slide. And so this is the contracting timeline that we're working with. And so for this upcoming year, what would happen is you'd contact me, send an email or call the office and say, oh, I'm interested in your programs. We would talk to you, see if it's a good fit. You'd sign an application. We go through the eligibility paperwork. We create your whole plan. Then there's that ranking process that happens, and that would be in the spring of next year. Then we have our selections for who gets paid. That happens later in the spring. Sometime in the summer, you would get your approval. You'd be signing your contracts. You'd be getting that basically that funding that's in those fund pools would then be assigned to your project that you created with us. And then sometime later in the summer, the fall, you would get that green light to start going. And then that's the point that you would then be able to start doing the practices. So any work that you do before that point is not eligible for payment. It's more of a long-term thing. It's not something that you're gonna come into NRCS today and we're gonna pay you in a month or two. It's you're gonna come into NRCS, we're gonna create a plan. It's kind of, we're looking forward to like a year out, and then we're creating more of you know, a 3-year type of plan typically. So it's a little bit more big picture than kind of what's right now. And then just a little note on the end is just saying, is the addition of there's other, because it's federal funds are being paid, there's other kind of things we have to make sure we're not harming endangered species, and that we're not destroying cultural resources. And so there's additional reviews that have to happen at that point. And so let's see, what's the next slide that we have? So I've included a lot of the different practices that we can help pay for. And so we can go through these fairly quickly because I know we're running low on time. So yep, cover crop, we all know that. Go to the next one. Mulching. So this is another one, another common practice that people will sign up for. And it's sometimes people do both. And so it's like mulching to a 4-inch depth, then the next year doing cover cropping, and really building up that, building up the soil as much as we can with these practices. So you can go to the next slide. And all the agroforestry practices, those are my favorite. I could do a whole, you know, several hours talking about all these, but I'll just leave these on here for now and just say that there's a lot of different types of tree planting practices that we can do to help address all kinds of different resource concerns. And so if you contact us, we can come out and figure out which one of those are best for you. So you can go to the next slide. And one of my favorite that I couldn't help myself from talking about is the mixed agroforest. And so this is a program that we have, which basically helps to pay for establishing an agroforest. And so it needs to be at least 25% native trees. It can be up to 50% food producing, and then the other 25% can be hardwood trees, or they can be those support trees like gliricidia, nitrogen fixing trees, chop and drop trees. So that's yeah, that's a great practice. So I recommend that one. And so next. We also work with, we can also work with piggeries. And so there's different kinds of Korean natural farming techniques that we can help to pay for and establish. And so this is a dry litter system. We also have the deep litter as well to help prevent that nutrient runoff and some of those environmental concerns from those piggery operations. So next one. And then, of course, there's also soil health is a big part in grazing systems as well, and ranching. And so, one of the things we can help to do is to create cross fencing so that you can rotate your cattle, and so that they don't overgraze and cause the soil health and erosion concerns from overgrazing. So. Yeah, and then I think we can go kind of quickly through the next few slides because I know we want to get to the next thing. So we help with wildlife, so native plant establishment to help with wildlife habitat. The next slide is about the high tunnel system that we talked about already. The one after that is about irrigation. And so with that, we can help to, if you already have an irrigation system, in place that you've been using for a few years, we can help to create a more efficient one that uses less water. And so go to the last slide there, and or row 4, that one rather. And so that's our contact information, and you can call the number, you can give me, send me an email, send Jenna an email. and just let me know, and we can set up a site visit, come see your farm, talk about your operation, give our advice. So yeah, so thank you so much, India, for giving me the opportunity to talk about our agency and all of that.
Thank you, Zephyr, for such a nice presentation. And I'll send out a screenshot of those dates because the 18th of November is coming up. I think we're short on time, so I was going to just have us move right into the presentation with Amy and Jason. So if you can introduce yourselves and let us know what you'll be speaking with us on. Thank you. And sorry to have
Sure.
you for last, but this really is where we're going for the future. And so this is
Yes.
kind of big picture. So
It kind of makes it easy, yeah, because we can just wrap it up. I'm Amy Koch. I'm the Assistant Director for Soil Science for USDA and NRCS. I oversee the whole Pacific Islands area, and one of the aspects that I focus on is soil health. And my co-lead for soil health is Jason. Jason, are you still on?
I am, yep. Yeah, thanks, Amy. Jason Hansen, State Agronomist and Water Quality Specialist, also help with TSPs, so thank you.
Yes, which are a key part of soil health management plans. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah, so today, India asked us just to kind of talk a little bit about soil health management plans, which it seems like you all are actually already familiar with, which is great. It makes our job a little easier. And so we can kind of just do a quick review and then kind of, you know, where we're going in the future of soil health management plans and soil health in general and PIA. So just a quick recap of the 4 different soil health principles that NRCS observes. So minimizing disturbance, maximizing biodiversity, maximizing soil cover, and maximizing living roots. Next slide, India. And so those principles are kind of, if you see at the very bottom, that's our foundation, right? That's what we're building on, our concepts, what we want to achieve. And so how are we going to get there? We're going to get there through the various practices that NRCS offers, which Zephyr did a great job at kind of going over some of the examples of those. And we've seen those throughout the presentations today, as well as what people are already trying and what's working and what's not working. And so those practices are going to help you address those principles. But then what's next? How do we make this kind of the big picture, the long haul of where you're going with your farm, and making that farm kind of a productive farm that meets all of your objectives and keeps you in business, right, as a farmer, but also doing good things and giving back to the soil and thinking less of the soil as a transactional, what is the soil going to do for me today? And, you know, what is it going to give me in 6 weeks? And instead, really doing this long-term thinking of, is my soil going to be here, and is it going to be productive for many years to come, for next generation, for, you know, and is it going to be resilient to different changes in climate that we may start to see? Those kinds of things are what the soil health management system are really meant to kind of build on. But just a couple of thoughts, I think, as I was listening through today, I think it's really important that, you know, there's this nice duality of part of the soil health management plan is kind of the soil health testing that we talked about a little bit. And so having that baseline establishment to know what you're starting with. Sally did a great job of kind of giving the history of her land and how that's impacting where she's going and what kind of practices she needs to implement in order to make her soil productive again. But also, you know, just kind of, there are all kinds of different practices, but what she wants to do, which are all really great things, by the way, Sally, really excited about what you have going on, you know, and taking that to that long haul. And so with that in mind, keeping in mind that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. You know, you get really excited and you want to implement all these practices right away, which is good. but sometimes it might take a little while to see those results, whether that be in lab results or just physical results that you can see in your soil. But actually, like sometimes there's short-term things that you just start to see after a very little amount of time, which is really exciting, and that's what kind of keeps you going. But you know, one thing like with the C to N ratio, it's like, oh well, you know, now the crops are yellowing a little bit. And so understanding that, you know, eventually I'm hoping that I don't have to put on those inorganic fertilizers, but maybe for now it's okay, because again, you want to stay in production, you want to continue to be a farmer. So it's all about, you know, kind of balancing all of those things. Next slide, India. Yeah, so this just kind of takes what we've been talking about. So you have the soil health principles on the left, and then you have all the different conservation practices on the right. So ideally in a soil health management system, we're going to meet all of those soil health principles by picking a suite of conservation practices that are going to, you know, adhere to all of those. And with that, there's one more slide, India, but really, you know, this is what I kind of wanted to focus on. And so there's, you know, we can have, you know, soil health isn't just for cropland. It often that is the focus, but it can, you know, definitely apply to agroforestry, which kind of meets those principles just by default, which is a great thing, right? And it helps to build your soil health really quickly. Yeah, Jason, what am I forgetting? What other thoughts do you have about kind of, and then I'll talk at the very end about kind of where we're going with soil health management plans in NRCS.
Honestly, I think over the 2 hours, a lot of it's been covered. So I don't really have anything outstanding, honestly.
Okay, all right, good. As far as where we are as an agency, so these soil health management plans kind of came about, you know, as a concept. They are planned through what Jason kind of mentioned, a technical service provider. So ideally, you know, we're trying to, it's kind of one of those chicken and egg things where, so we're trying to build up our technical service providers that are going to be the ones that can actually write these soil health management plans. But in order for us to get those people on board and want to be willing to go through some of the training and the paperwork that's required, we need to know, you know, they need to know that there's farmers like you that are on board with soil health and with these soil health management practices. So that's why groups like this are kind of perfect to bring everybody together and kind of show that there's interest. And then, you know, we can kind of continue building those plans. But nationally, it's something that came out, what, maybe for the first time 2 years ago, Jason? Maybe 3? I think I want to say 2 years. And so it's still really new. There's a lot of states that aren't even touching these yet. And so I'm really excited. This is a big soil health week for me. So happy to kick it off here with you all. But we have a soil health division in NRCS, and we have our regional specialists coming out to talk about soil health management plans, kind of coming up with a template. And so the feedback, so I guess where I'm trying to go with this is we're at the very inception of it, and it's still very pliable. So getting the feedback that, you know, India was kind of really talking to you all about earlier, we want your feedback, because we're doing these plans and we're not doing these plans for ourselves. We want these to be something that you want and that you value as farmers. So by you getting your feedback and kind of what you're seeing in the plans and what you're not seeing to India, and then India can get that back to us, that's really going to help us to move things forward. And so I'm hoping in the next year we're going to make, you know, significant progress. We've kind of been a little like, you know, inchworm kind of going along, but hopefully we're going to pick up the speed a little bit and really get these things going in the next year or two. I guess that's it, India. I'll turn it back over to you unless there's something else. Yeah, let me know. So there's my contact. Sorry, I didn't get yours on there, Jason. If you want to put it in the chat, people can have that. And I'm going to stop my video. It sounds like the audio might be going out again.
Oh, good. No, I mean, you guys were 1 minute
Woohoo.
before 6 o'clock, so we're right on time.
Okay,
This
perfect.
was, can everybody hear okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this, 4 to 6, not easy time. People are trying to get dinner for family, and we're all living busy lives. But thank you for joining us all. Is there any Q&A or anything that you guys want to put in the chat, or just kind of any outstanding questions you guys have? And thank you guys for being along for this this presentation. It is recorded. We will share it with others. But the next steps for you guys is that we will be waiting to get your soil health results from UH Lab. So just like we worked with Sally, we'll get to just kind of share those with you. We're not developing a soil health plan with everybody, but we are developing it with a few other. We were able to do 3 plans per cohort. But yeah, hopefully, you can see how you can develop your own plan, but we will be doing one-on-one sessions with you and helping you look at your results, read kind of what it's telling you, get your, your thoughts, and then helping you to work those into some goals and practices. Our last session is in person, and that's a date to be determined. It is at Kauai Community Ag Park with Yoshi and their farm crew. And we are working with Bob Schaefer, as I mentioned, on a compost design, an on-farm compost design, looking at the feedstock being some of their deep litter animal waste. And they also have animal product from their slaughter production system. So basically we have one more session, but we're gonna kind of take a break over the holidays. So we will be getting back to you guys one-on-one to schedule with you when we get your lab results back. And thank you for those who even paid for them on your own, who you were, not a commercial farmer and not in this cohort officially, but you've still participated and made the work to establish the baseline. And we're really excited to continue sharing, sharing and learning all together. So as farmer cohorts, as where we're going with soil health plans with NRCS, as the UH Crow Lab is taking more samples, you're becoming one more dot on that on those lab readouts. So your soil health will be a dot on there, and then someone and next year on Hawaii Island, when we work with those farmers, they'll have another dot, and we'll get to see just learn more about the potential for improving our soils and moving into this next phase of agriculture for Hawaii. So thank you for joining us all. And if there's I don't see anything else coming in the chat. I see Jason's information there. I guess we'll say hui ho, and thank you for all of your all just being willing to work with us and for attending those sessions. Thank you once again to all our speakers and to all of our farm hosts. And we'll be in contact soon.
Mahalo.
Mahalo, Eric.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Woohoo!
Have a great evening.
Okay.
Everybody.
Bye.